I thank you for those of you who've come up tonight already and said how much the book meant to you. It meant as much or more, I promise you, to me, because I worked on it with no help, with no encouragement, with no publisher, with no grant, just a sense that I had to do it. Donna Gracia asked me to do it. I'm convinced of it. And we used to have conversations, she and I, for those of you who read it. I got to call her DG. And DG and I, whenever I got stuck on the research, I would say, now DG, I'm doing work for you. You do some work for me. You tell me where I go next. Anyway, let me start at the beginning. One of the reasons that I feel so strongly about this work, of all the work that I've done in my life, is that we have, as Jewish women, so few role models, so few women who we can say we look up to, and we could follow maybe in their footsteps, if not completely, then just a little bit. We have our biblical women, and then it seemed like the women of the Jewish world fell off the cliff. At the end of the Jewish period, we hear nothing, almost nothing, about what went on among the Jewish women's lives until we get to the modern times. Is it possible that they were doing nothing? All these outstanding women of the Bible, the Esthers, the Sarahs, the Rebeccas, the Rachels, suddenly turned into nothingness? Is that really possible? I don't believe that. And as I was saying at dinner, I was asked to do a course just this spring on great Jewish women of history, and I eliminated the Bible and I eliminated the modern world because I knew there were so many wonderful ones in between, which I found. And tonight I'll tell you about Donna Gracia Nassi, one of the greatest ones of them all. Believe me, she was the Renaissance Moses. She was our Moses, a woman Moses, bringing these forcibly converted Jews out from Spain and Portugal to the promised land, as it were. Let me first of all explain that I always believed that in general, irrespective of women, Jewish history has not really told us the full story. There's almost nothing between ancient and modern times. Again, not only for the women, but for everybody else. Aside of the rabbis, whenever I ask a room full of people, give me 3 rabbi-free, it's a rabbi-free list, of women, not women, of people, Jewish people, men, women, between the destruction of the temple and the 18th century, the 19th century, and they can't usually give, I say, find me a mathematician, find me a poet, find me a musician, find me a politician. And that is a shame, because there were extraordinary achievements in your country and everywhere else. The other problem is, and the reason it's happened, is because Jewish history has a unfortunate need to dwell on what I call its victimhood, of the victim stories. Of the victim stories, there are endless. Why do we always have to dwell on our victim stories? Why can't we dwell on people like Donna Gracia Nassi, of our heroines, or our heroes? No, we like our victims, and we like more victims and more victims. As though nothing happened in the Jewish world for 2,000 years, that we went from what I call oy vey to oy vey to oy vey to oy vey. Like nothing good ever happened. Absolutely it happened. There were some glorious moments. Take your own background in Iran. It happened and it happened and it happened again. But we only talk about the catastrophes. One of the reasons, of course, is that the Jewish establishment is not very keen on talking about what is today called the Sephardic world, which means anybody who's not Ashkenazi, whatever the original idea was. And it's still very prevalent. When I get asked to speak on a book like this, very often the introduction includes the words, you're going to hear about a remarkable Sephardic woman. And I get up and I say, no, you're going to hear about a remarkable Jewish woman. Because for those of you who read the book, you will see that she didn't have somebody with a clipboard at the ports in Italy saying, I'm only going to take you on my ships if you are Sephardic, and if you're from the Ashkenazi world, which half of Italy was, we can't take you. She was for the Jewish people. She didn't make the distinction. Why do they make the distinction? I said, does anybody ever get up and say, I'm going to tell you about a remarkable Ashkenazi woman? No, it doesn't happen. So that bothers me. And then we come to the other reason that what we hear about as lay people is so narrow. Jewish world won't talk about what I call its embarrassments. If there are parts of the Jewish history that it doesn't feel good about, or it thinks the world doesn't feel very good about it, they won't talk about it. They won't discuss it. They won't analyze it. So the book I did after Donna Gracia was that very same problem. It was the Bolshevik Revolution. Because if it had not been for the Jews, we probably maybe wouldn't have had a Bolshevik Revolution, but don't tell anybody over 50, because they were here and they remember McCarthy. Anyway, I won't give you the names of all these wonderful people who did wonderful things, like Abraham Kresge's the map maker, without whose maps, you know who would have never got it. You know where? Here. He needed those maps. He also needed Abraham Zacuto's astrolabe. These are scientists. We don't talk about the great Jewish scientists of the period of many hundreds of years ago, and on and on and on. So we are left with one that I'm going to tell you about. Now, first of all, how did I find her, and why did she inspire me the way she seems to have inspired some of you who've just gotten through the book? I was working on a curriculum, it's in the back, for children in Hebrew schools and Jewish day schools like this, on Sephardic Jewish history. Sephardic being defined in this case for that series as Jews from Spain and Portugal. And I got a small grant for that. And I had to find people who could write a good lesson plan. I had to find people who could do a DVD for me. I had to find people who could do the music CD, which it all went together. It's all there at the back. And in the process, whenever I started to do a project like this, and I was really the coordinator as well as partially the writer for that one, I had to learn the history, same as I would on a newspaper. I had to learn the history thoroughly. And every time I came to the 16th century, Donna Gracia's name would come up and it would go. It was like a mirage. Whoops. Oh, Donna Gracia did this, this or this. And that's the end of that. Well, how did she do it? Who was she? Why aren't you telling me more? So I went and I knocked on the doors of the academics, because I'm a journalist, I'm not an academic. Although now, in the last 15 years, I've become a historian, but that's not the way I started out. And I said, if this woman did all those amazing things, why are we not writing about her? According to all the outlines, she ran an escape network that saved thousands of Jews from the Inquisition, Dayenu. She became a patron of the arts, Jewish literature, at a time when no one else was really doing much in the way of publishing Jewish literature. Not only the liturgical books, not only the religious books, but literature, Dayenu. She became the first one who stood up and said, I am not going to take the tyranny any longer, when they burnt at an inquisition one of her own agents and a lot of other conversos, as they were called, forcible converts. We're going to retaliate. And she managed to get, for a very short while, merchants in the Ottoman Empire, which were trading with Italy, to stop bringing their trading ships into the papal port of Ancona, to bring the port to its knees economically. Dayenu. And towards the end of her life, she managed to persuade the Sultan, for those of you who've read about it, to give her a swath of land in Tiberias and the surrounding villages in exchange for a guarantee of tremendous tax revenues, so that she could bring some of those refugees not only to the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, but into actually what we call today Israel. Dayenu. Is she not good enough that we should know about her? Should she not be falling off the lips of every Jewish child? But she isn't. And she won't until we make our movie or our TV series, and then she will. because we have to reach people with the media of today. And that's what I hope to do, starting off with the research for the book. So there I was doing the educational program, and I said, I want to know more about this woman. So I got the only book in English that was available, and it was very thin, for those of you who know. It's by Cecil Roth. It was written 60 years ago, and it's a mere outline of what they thought they knew about her. And that's when I went knocking on the doors of academia, and I said, you know, I'd like to do a full biography of this woman. She's never had one, not a comprehensive biography. Why hasn't it been done? And they all sent me away with the same problem. There are no documents. We never allow a PhD student to do it. We never ask anybody to do it if they're looking for tenure. Where are they going to find the documents? She lived all over the place. She started life in Lisbon, then she went to Antwerp, then she went to Venice, then she went to Ferrara, and then she finally ended up in Istanbul. Show me the documents. Well, I said in my sort of candid, I won't say that nicely, journalistic way, then she didn't do all the things that you reputedly say she did. We have just the outline of those. And by the way, how did she do it anyway? We don't know, and it passed down through the ages. Okay. From a journalist's point of view, she was either a fraud, didn't exist, or there's documents. Can't be both. She couldn't have existed and done all those things. There were no documents, or she didn't exist and somebody made her up. And as a journalist, that intrigued me. Those of you who have read any of my work, that really got me and set me afire. So the more I got turned down and told we could go away and do something serious, the more I got intrigued. And so I found out very pretty early on, almost immediately, there was nothing in English. That probably turned away most of the American scholars. It didn't turn me away. Maybe because I grew up in Europe. So I can find the expertise. Well, you can't read 16th century handwriting. Let me show you one of the things that I'm going to fast forward here to show you. Oh yes, this you should know about. This was a 1992 in Israel. They commemorated the expulsion of the Jews from Spain.
Right.
And they put her on the stamp. And when I asked, why did you put a Portuguese woman on a stamp about the expulsion of the Jews from Spain? And by the way, that's not her on the medal. I have a copy of this medal. There are very few of them, and I'll talk about it a bit later. Well, wasn't that her? I will go back to her. No, this way. No, it wasn't her. It was her niece. Well, we don't care. We just did the stamp. That was, even in Israel, the level of interest. Zip. All right, okay. What do I do? Where do I go? Where do I start? How do I do this? Everyone's telling me to go away, not to bother. So then somebody said, oh, the place to go is the Institute for the Study of Jewish Women in History at Brandeis University. It's brand new. It's being funded by Hadassah. Go up there and see the director. Good idea.